So today's the 23rd of February 2020. This is the Exwick cemetery, which I do quite a bit of green study here. So we've had a couple of recent storms here that have done quite a lot of damage across Exeter and Devon. That I'm aware of, we're looking at least 60 mature trees that have been damaged along Devon highways. Now you can see in front of me here, and hopefully I've got the camera positioned correctly, this very large pine tree that has fallen due to the very recent storm. In the distance we can see Exeter Cathedral, and then there's the Bartholomew Church to the left of the camera. So we're going to do a very quick piece of study on this tree. So this is a Monterey pine, which is sadly an endangered tree species. It is in decline. It's not native to this country. The only native pine is Scots pine, which is, as the name suggests, Scotland, but has been introduced into England many years ago and is now considered a native species in the UK. But this one's a Monterey pine, which is native to, from memory, the central coast of California. In this country they're planted typically in green spaces and parks. Very lovely pine trees, and the cones are very unusual. Now it is very sad when we see trees like this, or any tree like I say, suffer from storm damage. Usually when trees meet a sticky end, it's usually down to some greedy developer levelling the land and putting in a couple of small cherry trees and removing all the big ones. But we're not here to talk about greedy developers and the way Exeter's going. We're here to talk about this fantastic Monterey pine tree, which, like I say, I imagine the groundskeeper is already on top of this, but I will notify the council team just in case. Hopefully, I imagine when it fell, it was right in the middle of the storm, and nobody with any common sense would be out in the middle of a 60-mile-an-hour storm. So, like I say, I'm going to have a quick look going from where we can see the actual damage to the root system right to the tip of the tree. So we're going to try and make this make great advantage of this situation, because again it's terrible what's happened. Hopefully Exeter City Council and the team that manage the grounds here will find a suitable replacement, ideally 2 or more, but that's something to worry about in the near future. So the Monterey pine, let's have a closer look now. Just going to reposition this camera. I'm hoping it's not causing an issue. So here we are. And this is a very rare sight, because usually this is well underground. So to be able to see the sort of higher root structure is a very nice treat, despite the circumstances. So, like I say, unfortunately with the high winds, basically anchoring of this tree, the root system wasn't sufficient enough. So don't forget, this is, I don't know how many tons, but this is a lot of weight going right from the base of the tree right to the tip. Now Scots pine, because they're native to our soil systems, I imagine, and there are Scots pine in here, would actually fare better, because they're native. They know our soil conditions. They have better relationships with the various fungi underground. So unfortunately, when we introduce non-native tree species, this sort of thing is more prone to happen. So I can't really talk more about what's happened here. It's quite clear that this is now unfortunately the end of this tree. Unlike some trees that can recover through a suckering process, so lime trees are very good at that, and poplars are very good at that as well, to the point where they could be quite a nuisance. Black locust can send out recovering suckers as well, which again can be a pain if you've got a green space, because they suddenly come up everywhere. This pine tree typically will only propagate via seed. And we're going to go through the reproductive cycle in a minute, because to be able to see, the timing is absolutely amazing. So again, dreadful what's happened, but we need to turn this round. Let's turn this into something constructive and useful in memory of this great tree, because I've never got this close to a Monterey pine before, and I'm going to be able to touch the tip of the tree, which, that's amazing to be able to do that. And we're going to see, because it's actually flowering season, so we're very lucky that this could have happened any time of the year, but we're going to be able to see the stages of the female cones and also the male cones that are actually producing pollen, and you're going to see them in all the cycles, which is, be able to get close up is really hard to do, because all the female cones are typically way up high on a tree. So like I say, we're going to go right round, and you're going to see all the really cool cones, because pine trees, people only ever notice them because they're evergreen, they're always green. People never really see the lovely flowering, well, they are the flowering parts of the tree, the cones, but you only ever see the really big female cones. You never see the actual smaller, the very first steps of the male cones and the female cones, and then the actual transfer from the pollen onto the female. So like I said, the other sad part as well, you can clearly see there's lots of ivy covering here as well. So it's, when one system fails, more will follow as well, unfortunately. So you're going to find that whatever was living in or on this, this tree will be removed, I imagine, and then will be disposed of. Hopefully they'll be able to reuse some of the material in here. You can probably see over there that huge log. That was from, I've got to remember that, a silver maple, but that failed a few years ago. But they actually left the main stem trunk, which is great, because it means that the dead wood, what's left, is now a habitat for wildlife. So maybe they'll actually leave the main trunk and put it somewhere out the way, so it's not going to be, you know, like a hazard. But we'll see what happens. That's a decision between Exeter City Council and the management team here. So we're going to move sort of to the tip of the tree, or the top part, because at the moment this is, like I say, the underneath, and this is where I'd normally be studying, because again I'm not very tall. I can only get so high, but already you can see these here, and this is what people always see. So Monterey pine cones are a bit odd in the sense of, if you look at them, they're sort of like at an angle, and they're normally in like clusters of 3, 4, even sometimes 5. But that's a good example. That's your typical cross cluster of female cones which are mature. You can even see that some of them are starting to open up to release the seeds, but this takes a long time. This can take years for them to fully mature. So this, like I say, is one of the main branches where, again, this is still, if this was standing upright, I wouldn't be able to reach these cones. I can touch them now, but this would still be well above my natural height. What you might notice now is it's not just all the green leaves. You see all these like yellowy orange. If you were to look close, they look a little bit like sausages, really. But if we look closely now, you can see all that pollen. Hopefully the camera's getting that. Look at it all. Trillions and trillions of pollen. So these are the male flowers. So and they're, as I said, it's coated with millions of these, but it's the actual pollen grains. And as I said, you can see all the on there. I'm getting it covered on my fingers, you can see. So pine trees are wind pollinated. There's no insect pollination here. The job here of these little guys, like with all the mechanisms of the flowering world, is to try to get the male pollen, which again is tiny, but there's trillions of it, via wind onto the female flowers or female cones. Now there's only a narrow window of time to do this, so what the tree does, it's literally a bit of a lottery. It will literally make millions of these male flowers and then release trillions and trillions of pieces of pollen, and hopefully it relies heavily on wind lifting all of this pollen all around the tree and other Monterey pine trees, so that the male pollen can get onto the female cones. Of course, the thing is, all the female flowers are typically higher up. Like I say, these ones here that we're seeing, they're all mature female cones, but all the new female cones are further up on the tree. Now this is quite good here, because this is about a halfway point, and you can see this cone here, again, nice female cone, but it's still not fully mature. It's got probably another year on it yet, this one. And this is even better, that here is, again, these are the female cones, but from the season before. So it can take years for the cones to fully mature and release the seeds. So, like I say, it's brilliant to see them like this. And you can actually see here, and we've got some really good examples in a minute. But look at that. So on the very tips here, you've got your cross. So look, remember what we said earlier on the, like I say, central stem or that branch? And you've got your female, these lovely red female cones. And they're tiny, really. I mean, look at my thumb. But they will get bigger, and we're going to see that in a minute now. So again, look, you can just see all these male cones, and what they're trying to do is, and they're a bit too young, all this pollen is doing its best to get into here when these open up a little bit more. And that's, like I say, the reproductive cycle of Monterey pine, and it's a lottery, because whereas with insects you attract them and then they go to the plants you want, you're using wind to rely to get your genetic information from here to here, so that then this can make fertile cones, which then grow from these little things here, get bigger and bigger. Eventually, if you can see those mature ones down there, and this takes years, but as I said, it's a massive gamble, because you've got to rely on wind to get all that pollen into the right parts of the tree. And you can just look at the numbers. The amount of male cones outnumbers female cones probably 1,000 to 1. Yeah, but it has to be that way if it's going to use wind pollination, because it really needs to literally fill the air with male pollen to get it to the female flowers. So now we're going to go right to the tip of the tree, and I must say, I didn't think I'd be doing this anytime soon, but here, as far as I can tell, that is the tip of the tree. And look at that, I have touched the top of a Monterey pine tree while still being standing on the ground. But this is great, because you can see all of what's going on now. I mean, this is quite interesting, because like I say, usually we've seen the clusters of, if we go here, 4, although one might have fallen off here. So as I said, it's not always 4. In this case, you've actually got 7 here. So it varies between 4 to 7 female cones. And as I said, it's lovely, isn't it, when you can actually see all this detail. It's beautiful. And it's just great seeing nature in action, although again in the world of trees we don't always appreciate it, because for us human beings we're always moving around 100 miles an hour and not appreciating things. But this is going on, like I say, not just in California, because Monterey pines are planted worldwide, and it's not just these pine trees, there's lots of others, and they're all doing the same mechanism. They'll all have similar situations where they're all wind pollinated. And as I said, one other thing to know about pine trees is, oh, I've just fallen down a hole, that was not sensible, is they're monoecious, which means you have the male and female flowers on the same tree but different parts. And sometimes that can be quite hard to get your head round, because in some science lessons they only ever focused on orchard flowers like apples and bits, and that, as I said, can be difficult because you've got all of it in one flower, which that seems to be quite simple. But in this situation with pine trees, they're monoecious, so male and female flowers, same tree but different parts. And it's lovely to be able to easily be able to actually via a video clearly show that, because look, here we are, these are the male cones, look, all that pollen, look at it all. And look, you got your female, and there's such a difference, isn't there, when you look at it? I mean, I'm hoping this camera will, there's such a difference. I'm going to be covered in pollen when I go home. But there you go, monoecious. So your male flowers, female flowers, different parts on the same tree. And like I say, your stages of the female, because don't forget, when these guys shed their pollen, that's their job done. They'll just fall to the ground, and then the miracle that's nature, all those nutrients, minerals get reabsorbed by the root system and other plant structures beneath. But their job was just to try to pass this genetic information on via the wind to here, or another female flower of the same species, so that then this will gradually grow into a fertile cone. Like I say, the stages growing from here and then into this here. And then if I was, I'd have to, I mean, you can actually see there's a mature cone that's fallen on the floor. There's probably easily 500 cones on this tree for the female cone. So I mean, you can see right here, that's lovely, look, this massive cluster of maturing cones here. And I must say one thing with Monterey pine cones, they're really sharp. You wouldn't think it, but the sort of points on them, if you're not wearing gloves, you can quite easily cut yourself. So if you know, they're not soft like some cones, and they're really hard to get off. If you wanted to get some of the cones off that are actually attached to the tree still, you'd need quite a bit of strength, but you're easier just trying to get the ones that have just fallen off naturally. So, like I say, we've learnt quite a lot about this fantastic Monterey pine, and it is such a shame that I imagine in a matter of days they'll come along and cut it up into pieces, and who knows what will happen to the remains. But it's important that we take time to appreciate our trees, even if they've fallen. The amount of years of benefit this single pine has given to this part of Exeter is phenomenal. And yeah, it's a very sad day here to see this lovely pine tree now in its fallen state. But it has given us a bit more insight in a very rare situation that we can actually get up very close to a pine tree and then discuss and see, like I say, the reproductive cycle in relative ease. Because when I've tried researching this, you only get so much information on the internet, but it is difficult, because if this tree was standing, I'd need a crane or a very tall ladder to get right to the tip of that tree. So it's just turning something good out of something bad, and I'll be interested to find out what happens to the tree if they do reuse some of it here. I would like to see that happen, but as I said, that's not my decision to make. So as I said again, I'm gonna touch the top of the tree and say farewell to this fantastic Monterey pine. It's been an absolute pleasure. I must admit, I've only studied Monterey pine for just over 10 months of the year. I've already studied it in February last year in St Thomas Park. I came here today to study laburnum and purple leaf plum, and as I was just having a walk around, I noticed this pine tree on the ground, so I had to come along and investigate. Yeah, as I said, there's a good 500 plus mature cones here, but I don't imagine the council are going to be bothered about collecting or saving any of those. I imagine their first concern is removing it to a safe place and then cutting it up and mulching it or doing whatever. But I will find out more, and I will try and post it on the various social channels that I update regularly. So let's have another look at the damage. Not a sight you get to see every day, and I can assure you it's not a sight you really want to see regularly. But this also goes to show that as strong as trees are, storms, especially high winds, and we've had a lot of rain as well, so don't forget that affects the soil, the strength of the roots, the structure, and it happens. And thankfully, that I'm aware of, this would have, in this area, there wouldn't have been any, anybody would have got hurt. But if you imagine this next to a busy highway, that's a different story. So we have to still take things seriously. So don't get me wrong, I do take health and safety seriously, but I do think sometimes decision making goes a bit too towards it, and we've seen a lot of trees felled for that reason. But anyway, I could go on all day about this, but I need to get home and have some dinner. So let's say farewell to this fantastic Monterey pine. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for watching.